All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Archeo Viking. Today I have another guest, a fellow archaeologist, Anna, and she's here to talk about her research in the Caribbean. So why don't you introduce yourself, Anna? Tell us how you got into archaeology, and then like your research and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Anna Chitwood. I'm actually a graduate student at Northern Illinois University. I'm in my second year at this moment. And I was really interested in archaeology from a super young age. I kind of liked being able to know the why. I always asked, why were people doing this? Which is kind of hilarious, of course, because we don't always know why people did things archaeologically, but it's interesting and kind of not fun, but yeah, fun to speculate what certain things mean, the things that they left behind. And so I actually have an undergraduate degree in history because my undergraduate degree, university didn't have an anthropology degree. And now I've moved on to get a master's. And my research is going to be a paleoethnobotanical analysis of a ritual site in the Caribbean. And for those who don't know what paleoethnobotany is, it is the study of ancient plants, any plants that have been used or interacted with by humans. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, where my research will be is at a site called Cinnamon Bay. Cinnamon Bay is located on St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So if you're not super familiar with the Caribbean, I can maybe show you guys, let's see, a quick image of a map because I want to make sure everyone knows where we are. So let me go into oh, here we are at the beginning of a PowerPoint. Okay, so here we have the Caribbean. They go all the way here, just north of South America, Venezuela. Then we go all the way down to obviously Florida. And where we are is going to be here at Cinnamon Bay. So I actually lived, see this little tent here? I lived there for 4 months this past year. And I was lucky enough to get to work with the Virgin Islands National Park. And Ken Wild, the park archaeologist, really wanted to get we'll call it PBOT to shorten it, Paleoethnobotanical, we call it PBOT. He really wanted to get that done. And unfortunately, just the way things worked out, it hadn't happened yet. And these samples that I will be studying from the Cinnamon Bay site have actually been in a repository since I think 2001 or 2002. So over 20 years, they've been sitting, waiting to be analyzed, and I get to do it for my master's. And it actually will complete the assemblage of Cinnamon Bay, which is really exciting. And I'll go into who was at Cinnamon Bay in just a moment. But yeah, do you have any questions so far, Dane, before I move on?
No,
Okay.
I will have a couple of questions later,
Yeah.
probably.
Okay. So I might just stick with the PowerPoint. So who we have at Cinnamon Bay are the Taino. The Taino are an indigenous group to the Caribbean. And they actually migrated from the Orinoco River Valley, which you kind of saw on this map here. I'm sorry, I'll go back. So here, I think it's either here or up here. They actually sailed out of the Orinoco River Valley in Venezuela and made it to an island in the Caribbean. The first major migration actually occurred 6,000 years ago, and that came from Mesoamerica, and they actually went to Cuba. But the second wave of migration that happened around, I think, 3,000 to 2,000 years ago was from the Orinoco River Valley, and that's who we attribute to the Taino. So the Taino are an Arawak speaking group. So their language, actually, we use a lot of words from the Taino language that you may not even realize. So for example, canoe is actually a Taino word. It's canoa. Yeah, and then hurricane is actually a Taino word, and then maraca, hammock, all kinds of things. And it's really interesting because unfortunately, the Taino get so overlooked. They were the first people to come in contact with Europeans. And were the first MMIW. Matoaka was the first named MMIW, but the Taino were truly the first MMIW. And for that, it's missing murdered Indigenous women. So it's something that's really terrible. Just atrocities committed to these people. But the first ones to come in contact with Columbus, they actually had dinner with him on his ship. He landed on Guanahani in the Bahamas in 1492, and that's who he met. It was actually the Lusayan, but they are, I think, a branch of the Taino. I think typically people just call them the Taino. They were very, very similar culturally. Trying to think of where next to go. So, obviously I have this picture here. So let's maybe talk a little bit about their religion, because it's important when it comes to the site that I'm studying, which is Cinnamon Bay. It is a ritual site. Yeah. So what we have here are the petroglyphs. These are located on St. John, the same island that I have my research site. And this is called the Reef Bay petroglyphs. And that's just because that's the name of the bay / also the name of the plantation that was there during colonial times. So what you see here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, hopefully, is we have like a heart-shaped face here, which, for a while, we of course had no idea what this could possibly be, other than just an oddly shaped face. I always called it a heart shape because it looks like a heart. And of course I want to see, like, pareidolia, you always want to see like things and other things. So what we figured out is that from accounts from Europeans is what the Taino would do in order to convene with their gods and their ancestors. They would actually take a sort of snuff that was a hallucinogenic, and it was called cahoba. And what it was is they would take the seeds and they crush it up into a snuff, and then they would take it. I think they would snort it. I'm assuming. I've personally never done that. So, but somebody else did, more in contemporary times, decided when they found some cahoba, they crushed up the seeds and they tried it. And what the hallucinogenic state caused was it turned everything heart-shaped. So what we think is this image, this petroglyph, is coming from those hallucinogenic states that they would put themselves in order to convene with their gods. They had two main gods, Yakahu, who was the god of cassava and also, I believe, of the ocean. And then, I hope I'm right, I know for sure he's the god of cassava. And then we have Atabe, and she is the mother of Yakahu, and she is like a goddess of fertility. So what they would want to do is, of course, they would take this snuff in order to have these hallucinogenic trances so that they could convene with their gods, but also their ancestors. So we also have this symbol here, which has been since appropriated by many St. John businesses, specifically a resort called Keneal Bay Resort, which actually got destroyed in a hurricane in 2017, sadly, very sadly. But it's just kind of ironic they were appropriating this symbol, and now people call it the Keneal Bay symbol, even though it's a petroglyph made by the Tainos. So what we think this one could be is the orbital crest. So let me go forward really quick. What I mean by orbital crest is their eyes. So like if I'm, yeah, if I do that same symbol, like what they have, it's the eyes. They believed they put a lot of weight, I should say, in the eyes, and that a lot of their different imagery that they would have in their material remains had eyes, and they tended to put something such as like a dark colored shell or even like a black stone of some kind here in one eye, and then they'd have a white piece in the other eye, and the dark represented the afterlife or death, and then the light represented life and living. So that's where we get the idea of what could potentially be the orbital crest. Okay. So you may also notice that there is, I don't know if you can tell, but this is water. It's very still at this moment. This water actually at the petroglyphs maintains pretty much the same level year round, regardless of the level of rainfall, which is quite incredible. Okay. And so the Taino really liked this reflection because in their eyes, when they went there, they were reflected into the afterlife and their ancestors were reflected back to them. And it was a way for them to convene again and have these moments where they could ask for help or advice. And so that's what the reflection is for, because even you can see that it perfectly reflects their petroglyphs in the water, and it's almost a mirror. It's beautiful. And I got to spend time here, and it is truly in just perfect, what would be the word? Stability. What, it's serene, and you see dragonflies like dancing on the water, and that's how you know that an environment is very leveled out. And you could feel like it was just a good energy there. And I was like, I understand why they would want to come here, because it's just so beautiful, and it's very quiet. Like you're actually really far away from any of the buildings on St. John, which there are quite a few, but in general, obviously they wouldn't have that. But you can't even really hear the ocean at this point, which is pretty astounding. At least I couldn't hear it. Let's see what else I have on here. Okay, so one of the issues with I shouldn't say issue. Something that was misinterpreted for quite a long time was that people believed that these were actually carved by enslaved Africans, which unfortunately is not true, although that would have been incredible. But the way that we were able to confirm this, because what was happening is there was actually like a school teacher on St. Thomas or St. John that was telling all of their students, oh yes, those were carved by enslaved Africans. So enslaved Africans were not brought until, I believe, like the 15th century.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to prove that, in fact, it was not enslaved Africans who carved the petroglyphs by what we found at Trunk Bay. That top left image is of a potsherd, probably from a large pot, and that is the heart-shaped face again. And that was dated to 900 CE.
Okay.
Yeah, so they have these fantastic, fantastic ceramics. They're very beautiful. And then we have here. Do you want? I don't know if you were in my live the other day long
No.
enough, but did you want to take a crack at what you think this is? That bottom left one? I might have mentioned it when you were in there.
No, I,
No, it's okay.
yeah,
So
I'll just let you.
this is a face. This entire thing is a face. And what we have here, this is a bat nose, which I
That,
think I might. Yeah. So
okay.
it's I believe it's a horned nosed bat. I can, for some reason I've been forgetting, but it makes sense. And for some reason that came to me one day and I was like, oh, it's the horned nosed bat. Like that's their actual name. So that's where they got the idea for this nose. And again, we're just moving back because it's all connected. This water, bugs love water. You ever like go outside on a hot summer day and you left like a bucket of water out, you have bugs everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's what would happen. They would flock to this water. And so who else would flock to the bugs, the
Yeah.
bats, because they're hungry. And so it would almost be like they would come in and they would be flying around in circles, dipping to the water, getting their bugs. And so the Taino would see this. And so,
But yeah,
so
that makes a lot of sense, of course,
yeah.
especially though slightly less tropical, but you and I both grew up in the South, so yeah, that
Mhm.
happens in the South a lot. Uh, so yeah, so
Yeah. And so what we think might have been, so obviously they're spending time with bats, or at least they're seeing them.
mhm.
And so what has been speculated is that they potentially believe that the bats are actually bringing their ancestors' souls back into the living for a short period
Interesting.
of time. And so then it's another chance for them to chat and have that opportunity to get advice. And so they looked at bats as being their ancestors, which I thought was lovely.
Okay.
And also very important to note too, that bats are one of the only mammals that is indigenous to the Virgin Islands. So this would have been one of the only mammals they saw. And what other mammals they did see were ones that they brought themselves. So
Okay. Very interesting.
again, so we have that horn-nosed bat. Isn't it so cute? It's like a little puppy.
It is.
I think they're so adorable.
Oh, I love bats.
We
Yeah.
have more instances of these ceramics having the bat nose, and what you're actually seeing is headdresses on top of the heads, minus obviously that bottom one. But
Okay.
so obviously these headdresses were to represent somebody important, a cacique, which is their chief, maybe a god, who knows. And I already mentioned this, which so we'll skip past that. Okay, so on to Cinnamon Bay a bit more.
Okay.
So I want to give that background as to who the Taino are, what they believed in. Again, I just will reiterate that Yakahu and Atabe are their two main gods, god of cassava and god of fertility. So what we see here is a historic map. As you can see, it's from 1780. And we have this road, which is that yellow line. That's not there anymore. That road has long since been discontinued of like use. But it is still traversed. That area is Cinnamon Bay. So there's this little black square, and that is the Cinnamon Bay site. That whole image though is of Cinnamon Bay.
Okay.
So, yeah. So this whole image, that's the whole Cinnamon Bay. It says Keneal Bay. That I believe is the Dutch word for cinnamon.
Oh,
so yeah, that might be a little confusing. So which is funny because there's actually a bay that is typically only called Keneal Bay, but so there's two cinnamon bays technically on St. John. So what happened with this road is that it was put in, I think, in the early 1600s.
Okay.
And it went directly over the site that I'm studying. So when you have, I'm assuming it was probably just a bunch of rocks like cobbled essentially. When you do something like that and you cover a site, which they had probably no idea that they were covering something so incredible. Oh, sorry. I also did not tell you guys when this site was being occupied. So that's important. So this site actually was never occupied, but it was visited continuously from approximately 1000 CE to 1490 CE, which is just crazy because they just missed Columbus, and he actually sailed right past St. John. So if this road was built or like placed in the 1600s, that means that that site was only uncovered and subject to the elements for a little over 100 years. So that road perfectly protected the site, not just from natural disasters, but also from animals. Crabs are the worst thing. I love them. They're cute. They taste great, but they love to burrow, especially land crabs. They burrow, and I've watched them burrow and throw pottery out of the hole behind them. So when you put a road over it, no crabs were burrowing into the site. So when they started excavating the site in, I believe, 1992, it was perfectly intact, which just like never happens. Maybe I shouldn't use the word perfect, but compared to like what we see typically, it was beautiful. So what they were seeing is that almost exactly 10 centimeters below the surface equaled 100 years, because like every 10 centimeters you would go, it would equal 100 years because it was so perfectly intact. And they actually, what made them, they learned early on that it was intact because they got down about 20, I think it was between 10 and 20 centimeters below surface, and they hit a turtle plastron. So a turtle plastron, I know, that's the belly of a turtle shell, and that is like mostly cartilage. That stuff does not preserve very often. So and I actually did help with some zooarc analysis when I was on St. John, and we didn't see carapace. We saw turtle like bone, but we didn't see carapace plastron, because it was because it's cartilage. So that they got to that and they were like, no way, right? Because they were like, you know, like that just doesn't happen.
Mhm.
So what we saw, let me see where we're at. Okay. So what we saw at Cinnamon, so this is actually Cinnamon Bay. This is my boss right here. He's the one I worked with when I was on St. John. And this is the site. They did a second excavation. This is a different little section that they did. I believe that the section that they did was a bit further to the left of this image.
Okay.
And so I know, can you imagine digging in sand like that? I actually didn't get to do any sand excavation,
Oh yeah.
but it would be interesting. It's definitely a learning process. I hope to be able to go do actual excavations myself, but I think it's
Yeah.
really cool to be able to work on a site that's already got a lot done for it.
Yeah.
Um, so when I totally just spaced, let me get a sip of my drink.
No, that's okay.
Um, from our understanding, Cinnamon Bay was a ritual site that was continuously visited, most likely annually. So every year they would visit and they would offer something. What they were offering tended to be foodstuffs. So fish, top shell, like, sea snails that they would eat. And hopefully a lot of plant-based food because that would be really great for me.
Mhm.
And they would actually, sometimes they would prepare this food, they would cook it, and then they would leave it as an offering. And this is again a way for them to be in favor with, please, like, look down upon us with like good grace. So that was one of the big things about Cinnamon, is that it was just a yearly offering site. Um, it took them, because, okay, on top of being a government agency, because this is the national park, this whole area is a national park.
Mhm.
It took 2 years for them to excavate a 50 by 50 centimeter unit because the site was so dense with material.
Yeah.
They had to go down like half a centimeter at a time because they were just constantly pulling out stuff, and they had to map every few minutes. Like
Yeah.
I wish we could have been there, but from my understanding, it took them a long time, and that it totaled out to be 2 whole years for a 50
Wow.
by 50 centimeter unit. And they also at the same time, I believe, were doing multiple, like, I think, oh my gosh, my dad's phone is down here. Sorry. They did multiple, I think it was like, I know that they did something larger than a 1 by 1 meter
Okay.
unit. So they had a few other units adjacent to it, but this one particular one where they took a lot of samples from was a 50 by 50 centimeter unit, which is, it's
Yeah.
pretty small compared to what we typically deal with.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Oh, okay. And then, so just the so what really quick as to why I'm doing this research. So my goal is to look at the botanicals, at the plant remains, and try to finish what has already been done. So at Cinnamon, a ceramic analysis has been done, an analysis of gold artifacts. There are 2 gold artifacts found at Cinnamon. I don't know much about them. I wish I knew more. And then the zooarch, aka the faunal and animal bone analysis, was completed actually just a year ago, or technically I think 2 years ago, by a colleague of mine who I got to work with when I was on St. John.
Okay.
So by doing the PBOT, I finish it up. I finish up the whole thing, I round it out, and we have learned a lot from Cinnamon, and I'm excited to be able to contribute to that, because we'll get to learn about how they interacted with their environment, what plants they used, daily, and maybe why it was important for them to give it to their gods as an offering, because it was obviously something important to them as well. So, and this picture that you see here is a photo that I took.
Okay.
Actually, those are my boot prints. I always, like, when I was working, I was wearing my boots, so I didn't care. I would always just go walk on the beach when I had a little break. And what you're seeing here is erosion. So one of the big things is that with climate change, we are losing our shorelines. Cinnamon Bay site is a shoreline site. And in the past, I think 20 to 30 years, they have lost like 50 feet of beach. So 50 feet of shoreline has just washed away. And with it goes a lot of artifacts. And And it's just, we're losing all of this information. And for a people that was already like subject to such atrocities and genocide, it's horrible to watch as their material remains and their history just washes away and we have nothing we can do about it. So the goal would be to, continue excavating in other places, but also to finish what we already have before these sites are gone, because unfortunately that's just the reality of climate change. So this is a lot of erosion. These rocks that you're seeing in this image are not typically visible. Those are usually covered with sand, and some days they would actually be covered with sand because of how much sand comes and goes with the tide. So yeah, so that's my research. I hope I covered everything. It's hard because like I know so much about this topic.
Oh well,
Sometimes
you
I
can
don't
say,
realize. Huh?
yeah, and you can say more if you want.
No, I would love to know if you have any questions.
Well, yeah. So for one thing, going back to that, the petroglyphs, the rock
Yes.
carvings, um, do I don't know if any Taino people are currently living in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I know obviously they're living in other places, but do any Taino people come and still visit this place at any point in time, or are they aware of it, or
So I would say that okay, so one of the things that's really sucks about like what happened in the Caribbean. So just for context, so the Taino were enslaved at
Mhm.
some point after the arrival of the Europeans, and they were just not physically able to keep up with the needs of owners, which is just
Yeah,
horrible.
yeah, of course, yeah.
And the life expectancy of an enslaved person in the Caribbean was 7 years.
Mm.
So you can imagine that a lot of these people either died at the hands of a European with a weapon, or they died by being enslaved because they couldn't handle the labor that was expected of them. So unfortunately, that means that there were, thousands of people who were just killed and died due to European infringement. And so at the moment, there are individuals and groups throughout the Caribbean who are seeking to get recognized federally as a tribe because they are not. And I would say that there are a lot of people who identify as having Taino ancestry. I don't know how active they are in connecting with it. I spoke with a lot of local people while I was in the Caribbean, and I consider many of them great friends of all ages. And they knew about the Taino, but they never said anything about identifying with them. And they don't have to, but
Yeah,
if they don't say anything, I'm not gonna want to assume that, right?
yeah.
So I couldn't tell you if any people who identify as Taino and want to connect with it have visited. I can imagine they have. It's a beautiful place. It's a very rough hike to get there, but it's worth it. And yeah, I know that. Yeah, like I said, I know that there's a few groups who are looking to get federally recognized, specifically on St. Thomas. So again, oh, I guess I don't have. So here we have, St. John. St. Thomas is, I believe, oh my gosh, right over here. Oh wait, hold on. No, right over here. And then St. Croix is just south of it. So we are in the Virgin Islands. So St. Thomas is very close by. It's about a 30-minute ferry ride. So I imagine that those people part of this group looking to get federally recognized on St. Thomas are, I would imagine they visited Reef Bay to check out the petroglyphs.
Okay. All
Mhm.
right. Okay. Now another thing, another thing, and this is, I know this as as a fellow archaeologist, I know this is going to annoy you
Oh
slightly.
no.
However, um, so on the map you see right up the other map.
The other map.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh no, the map of the Caribbean overall.
Oh, sorry. The
No, that's
other,
okay.
the
That's my
other
fault. I should have
map.
been specific. So yeah, so um, and you may recognize what I'm about to talk about in a second. But so you see Bimini right here.
Mhm. Yes.
So in a certain individual's Netflix documentary,
Oh no.
he talks about s- supposed effigy mounds of like uh one that vaguely looked like a shark, and other things like
Uh-huh.
that. And of course he attributes that to Atlantis. However, in
Oh, of
my
course.
video, through my three-part video series debunking him,
Hmm.
I pointed out that it's like, well, because he postulated, and it wasn't a bad idea. He's like, well, of course these would be animals they would recognize if of a seafaring culture. And I was like, okay, fine,
Okay.
but why not the Taino or the Arawak or other
Hmm.
peoples like that? So, have you seen any or in your research come across any mention of effigy mounds by the Taino people via
I have
archaeology or
not.
anything?
This is completely new to me. And personally, I actually really don't know much about Bimini at all. Honestly, like I
I looked and I couldn't find anything either. So I mean,
I I know nothing. And I picked this map because I like that, it says Taino and island, it should say Kalinago, but
Kalinago, yeah,
territories.
yeah,
So I feel like it highlights it well, but I didn't even notice the Bimini. Actually, I noticed it earlier when I was like quickly peeking at the thing and at the PowerPoint. I was like, Bimini, I need to look into that because like obviously it's saying that this whatever group is in Florida is related
yeah.
to the
Well,
Caribbean.
and to me, that sort of
Mhm.
talking about the Taino and the fact that I postulated that, not knowing much about the Taino
That's
in
all
that
right.
video, the sort of so I think so this sort of makes me lean towards yes, the Taino people. If I don't think they were effigy mounds, I think they were just ironically shaped like sandbars,
Yeah.
but yeah, but it so, but yeah, I figured while I had somebody who was studying the Taino culture, I would ask that because, of course,
Yeah, no, it's fair. And St. John is not the only place where there are petroglyphs or,
yeah.
images, because there's also, I'm gonna actually hold on, let me do this. Hold on, sorry.
Okay, that's
I'm
fine.
going to pause my share and then I'm going to, oh wait, I can't do that. Huh, I have no idea what I'm doing, obviously. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second.
There we go.
Let me pull up another, um, I'm gonna show you something called TBIS.
Tebus. Okay.
Yeah, TIBES.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's go with petroglyphs. Okay. It's a ceremonial center. I don't know a lot about it, but they have fantastic images. And I think these ones, yes, these are also petroglyphs, but let me go ahead and share my screen again. These ones are of frogs. It'll take
Oh,
a
okay.
second.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course it'll
they
take. Yeah.
are so
Uh,
interesting.
oh, okay.
and and like it's just, yeah, so we have all kinds of petroglyphs. This is, it's just amazing. But these I believe have been confirmed to be frogs, which would make sense. At
Yeah,
least someone told me that was a frog. I'm gonna
it
say
looks
this
like
right
a
now.
frog.
I was told that it was a frog. Please don't come for me if I was told
Yeah.
incorrectly.
I
I've
mean,
not
they
been.
look like frogs.
They do, and they had a lot of frogs. There are a lot of frogs in the Caribbean. Specifically, a lot of people know of the coqui, which is COQUI, because they make a sound that literally sounds like their name, coqui,
Oh,
coqui. So, like, there are a lot of frogs in the Caribbean that I think they may have actually named it coqui.
okay.
So they obviously must have liked frogs. But yeah, they have other images, but I've never seen a shark. So.
Well, and then and that's fair, but also at the same
Mhm.
time, we do know that they traded with the continent, with Florida, with Mesoamerica, with South America,
Yeah.
so we do know based off of a lot of archaeological evidence that
Mhm.
the peoples who lived in the Caribbean traded. So I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if they
Yeah.
was an image of a shark somewhere,
Yeah.
but that was just of course, it was just he was trying. Of course, he always does everything in his power to
Oh,
ignore
of course.
anyone who's not white. So yeah, but it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
seafaring people already present in the Caribbean probably know what sharks are.
Oh my God.
No need for Atlantis. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, but honestly, like at least in my experience, just the last thing about that,
yeah.
is that when it came to the Virgin Islands, I don't think that there were a lot of sharks other than nurse sharks
Hmm.
that they would have maybe seen. I don't know if that was maybe the time of year I was there, but I was told that there really aren't a lot of sharks in the
That's
waters there.
interesting. That's interesting. I was not aware of that, and that's I mean, which is very interesting because you go a little bit north and
Hmm.
look at Florida, and I know this because for a paper I just submitted for publish, I was looking at research on similar sites in Florida, and they were mentioning that there
Yeah.
were a lot of shark bones and things like that that they had
Oh,
seen.
interesting.
Yeah, and also in a
Yeah.
presentation I saw
Hmm.
at a conference just a couple of weeks ago, the person was like, "Yeah, there's a lot of shark and bones in Florida." So, um,
Okay.
you
So
never
maybe
know.
that's just genuinely, I was
Yeah,
there at the time of year, maybe when they weren't
yeah.
as
Oh yeah. Well, and
active.
of course you would know better than I would.
Oh
I
no,
haven't
yeah.
been there. Yeah. So, just putting that out there for possible future taking a look at that. If
Oh
I come
yeah.
across anything like that, it's in there because uh yeah, I don't like the ocean, so I don't pay, pay much attention to that.
I get that. I was also pretty like nervous about the ocean, but as I said, I was working for the National Park Service,
Okay.
and in my first week, I learned how to snorkel and then assisted with an underwater survey. And I was in the water for 2 days straight, and then a third day the next
Oh,
week,
okay.
um, just floating on the surface in a wetsuit and
Okay.
helping guide divers. So believe
Yeah.
me, I was not a fan of the water. I got used to it very quickly though.
Yeah. And while we're on that subject, let me ask. So what made you pick this site for your research? Like, what led you to decide to do this for
Mhm.
your master's thesis and things
Uh,
like that?
so I would say that part of it is that it became an opportunity where I was really interested in, again, obviously, this is a term that is fraught with issues, but I was very interested in protohistoric
Okay.
groups, like wanting to look at that time period of contact where people were, Europeans were meeting indigenous peoples. And I was interested to see how indigenous peoples um, maintained their agency and
Hmm.
were able to maybe fight through that the efforts of Europeans to wipe them out by maybe seeing a change in their pottery. And I wanted to look at that because initially I was interested in ceramics. Well, I hadn't really decided where I was going to do my research
Hmm.
when I started my master's, but I had at least that idea that I just explained.
Yeah.
And then I started looking into the Taino because I was like, wow, this is the first group that ever came in contact with Columbus. They are very important. And I'd never even heard of them until
Mhm.
a year and a half ago, which I thought was just awful
Yeah.
because
It is.
they are very important to our history, and their history itself, separate from ours, is incredible. Um, so I started looking into it and I was like, I wonder because they were the first. I wonder what might be present in terms of pottery. There isn't really anything in terms of like contact period pottery because unfortunately they were very quickly eradicated. So I don't know if that's the right term. I apologize. They were very quickly killed and
Uh,
enslaved.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
their material culture kind of got snuffed out. And so but before I knew that, I got in contact with Ken Wild, who is the park archaeologist on St. John,
Mhm.
and he never got back to me. So that's part of that's stop there and then move forward. That was in
Mhm.
September of 2021. I had
Mhm.
emailed it, got
Yeah.
nothing back. Okay. Finals week of 2021, so the fall semester, I get an email from Ken. He's like, "Hey, Anna, give me a quick call." And I was like, "Hey, he's going to finally answer my question? Dope." So I call him like probably 5 minutes after he sent the email. He answers and he's like, "Hey, I was talking with a colleague who we were both familiar with, and he said you'd be a great fit for an intern. Is this
Okay.
something that you'd like want to do?" And I was like, well, I am currently in my master's program. I just don't know how that would work."
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, that probably won't work. And I was like, "Oh, okay, but really quick, could you like answer my question that I emailed you about?" He's like, "Yeah, there really isn't anything." And I was like, Okay." So then I hung up. I said, "Thank you," of course. I hung up. And then I kicked myself because I was like, "You just got offered an
Yeah.
internship with the National Park Service in the Caribbean,
Yeah.
and you just said no?"
Yeah.
So I very quickly called my advisor and I was like, "I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
I just got offered an internship, an archaeological internship with a national park, which is very big for anyone who might end up watching this. Like,
Yeah.
it can be hard to get into the government
Yeah.
with archaeology. So getting that very early on in my career, it was big. So I was like, "Oh my gosh, I messed up." So I very quickly, I called her, I texted him like simultaneously. I said, "Ken, I do actually want to consider this. If you could give me some time, I would really love to talk about maybe actually interning for you." So I unenrolled from all of my classes for spring semester. I hopped on a plane January 15th and I was there until May like 5th of 2022. So I was there for 4 months. It
Okay.
was a fantastic time. I definitely like learned that island life is very different. But while I was there, I was living on Cinnamon Bay. So I
Okay.
was living in a tent and I was passing the site every day. I didn't really like see anything, of course, because it's all covered up as you do. But
Yeah.
I was doing analysis on artifacts from Cinnamon. And I remember I was still looking to do pottery. And they were like, so Ken and then a colleague, Dr. Brittany Mistretta, who did the ZOARC, the faunal analysis of Cinnamon Bay just this past year for her PhD dissertation. They were like, "Anna, you should do PBOT." And I was like, or, botanical
Yeah.
analysis. And I was like, "What?
Yeah.
No." And they were like, "Seriously, though, like it would be so cool if you did that because it would finish up everything for Cinnamon." And that would work so well because we are all like connected, me with Ken and
Mhm.
me with her and all of us together. We know each other super well. We all practically lived together for four
Yeah.
months. So, it was kind of just an opportunity that was given to me. And I feel very, very lucky.
Okay.
That doesn't just happen every day where
Yeah.
someone kind of says, "Hey, take this site and finish it up." But at the same time, they needed it done and I needed a site. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I love the site. I'm very, very passionate about it. So,
Well, that's good. That's good. Uh, as a lithicist or aspiring lithicist, how
yeah.
what about the lithics? How much stone tools or debitage or
Okay.
lithics overall have you seen there, or
So,
has been found there?
yeah, a lot of the stuff that I found that I've seen, they didn't really have any bow and arrow type of thing. They didn't have projectile points.
Uh-huh.
At least that's what I've been told. And I've
Okay.
not seen any evidence of that in any of the books I've had to read for my
Okay.
thesis. But they did have something called a petaloid celt,
Okay.
which is like, I'm trying to think of how to describe. So petaloid, 5 PETA is 5, I believe.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so like it kind of looks like that, like, and it's smooth, very smooth.
Mhm.
I can't remember if it's made out of a specific stone, but potential, there's speculation that it could have been a weapon. It could have been tied to the top of like a stick
Yeah.
and used to as a blunt force object, like, and then we also have potential use as a hoe for
Yeah.
farming. They did farm.
Of course.
And they also had grinding stones. But in terms of lithics, I can't say that I saw a lot.
Okay.
Um, because of, again, like I'm studying like the Peabot. When I was there, I was focusing a lot on the
Okay.
animal bones, but I mostly saw petalloid celts and, yeah, big grinding stones. So,
Okay. All
so.
right. Well, it is what it is, you know. But yeah, that all sounds very fascinating. So we're about to end in just a couple of
Mhm.
minutes, but it is something I want to sort of. I always like to do when I have archaeologists on, but
Mhm.
also especially now that it is Women's History Month and Women's
Mhm.
Heritage Month. Uh, what would you say or suggest to potential to women, or really all
Mhm.
individuals, but women, being it's Women's History Month,
Mhm.
who might be looking to go into archaeology to,
Yeah.
what would be your advice essentially? So
Find people that you can get in your corner. I think that archaeology is very big with meritocracy. That's kind of a big word, but it's this idea that you have to be liked. But even if you just have a few people in your corner, you don't need to be the most liked person. And it's about loving what you do. If you don't love it, then it's best to just move on. I know that sounds kind of negative.
yeah,
Archaeology is not the most lucrative field. You're
no,
not going to end up making a lot of money. And so that I love what I do and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that, I may not be making 100K, being a millionaire or anything. I'm
no,
just happy to do
yeah,
what I do. And I think that if you have professors who are, or, if you manage to have archaeologists in your life who aren't professors, but are just already professionals, like
yeah,
get them in your corner and just like learn everything you can from them. I was not actually on a path to do archaeology until my senior year of undergrad
yeah.
because I didn't have anyone until my junior year of undergrad in my corner. And I still credit him, Dr. William Balco. Thank you if you ever spoke.
Oh, I've met him.
Oh
I've
my
met
gosh,
him.
that's amazing. Yes.
Yes, I
Um,
worked with him up at that site in Blue Ridge, not Blue Ridge,
Dawsonville?
Dawsonville. Thank you. Yes,
That was my field school site, Dane.
yes, I worked with him last year for a week. Yeah,
Wow. Oh my gosh. I wanted to go to that. He had invited me. I couldn't make it. But yes,
yeah,
Dr. Balco, I credit him a lot. He was the guy in my corner and I still have him in my corner. He is somebody I text. Sometimes I'll be like, "Hey, like what's this about? Like, hey, what projects do you have going on?" He
yeah,
works for UWM Milwaukee CRM now. And I would not be in an archaeology program if it wasn't for his help. He helped me get where I am.
mhm,
And I feel very thankful, of course, for my graduate advisor, Dr. Bardoff. I think that there are really good people in archaeology, and it's just a matter of finding them.
yeah,
That can bring you such great success and happiness.
yeah,
So
yeah. Because and I feel the same way. Like I'm not in archaeology for money. I'm in it for because I enjoy
yeah.
it and I have legitimate research interests that I want to do and fields I want to work in, but it's not for
Mhm.
money. It's because I love
Yeah.
archaeology and history. So
Mhm.
yeah, and I think that's very good. Yeah, because I've had cause I got lucky. I got introduced to archaeology in the sixth grade by one of my
Oh
mentors,
yeah.
and he and I have been in contact for decades and are
Mhm.
still talk. And I've got my current mentor that I work with the most. He's helped and given a lot of advice and things like that
Mhm.
too. So yeah, and I'm
Awesome.
fortunate to have met a lot of good archaeologists like Dr. Balco,
Mhm.
and of course I work. My job is in archaeology right now, and I have a lot of good archaeologists who are my
Mhm.
superiors, and they are good at to work with too. So yeah, so I think that's a very apt statement. Get
Yeah.
people in your corner at least.
Sure.
So yeah, especially considering archaeology is increasingly becoming a field dominated by women.
Mhm.
People don't realize that, but I've actually seen more women archaeologists than I've seen men archaeologists, to
Mhm.
be honest. So so yeah,
Awesome. Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, Anna.
Mhm.
And of course, Anna, and we're not going to reveal what we're doing yet, but Anna and I and some of our colleagues are in the process of getting a certain something together that might take
Yeah.
a couple, 2, 3 more weeks because unfortunately things work that way. Uh,
Mhm.
so you will be seeing more of her. Uh, but she's always good to come on. Thank you for coming on and talking about
Mhm.
your research. Everyone, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the video. And do you want to plug anything, Anna, before you go?
Yeah.
Like
I have.
your shop, for
Oh
example.
yeah. So I am on TikTok at Anna underscore the underscore archaeologist. And I also I'm on Instagram, but I don't really post much about archaeology on there. But I also make earrings. I do make earrings. I have a lot of fun doing that. So if you're interested, I have an Instagram for that, which if you find my TikTok, you can find my earrings. But that's at Daisy Designs by Anna on Instagram. And I have a lot of really cute stuff. So check it
Yeah.
out. But thank you so much, Jane. This has been lovely.
Oh, you're very welcome. And you have thank you for coming on. And you have a good night. And again, everyone, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And y'all all have a good night.